What if they told people that the silver market was huge, unlimited, and protected by endless supply, but almost nobody realized something very important was quietly happening behind the scenes? Because the truth is far more shocking. There are only 5 major silver mines left in the world that truly matter, and the companies controlling them may hold more power than most people understand. Now imagine this for a second. What happens if industrial demand suddenly explodes, while supply stays trapped in the hands of only a few players? Could the next silver crisis already be building, silently, right in front of everyone? And why are so few people talking about this? Stay with us, because what they are not telling the public might completely change how they see silver forever. Welcome back to Rules Changed. If they are joining this family for the first time, they should take 1 second and gently press that subscribe button, especially those wise viewers who have seen markets rise and fall over the years, because sometimes experience understands warning signs before the crowd does. And before they continue watching, tell us something in the comments. Where are they watching from today? For most people, silver feels simple. They think silver comes from giant mines spread across the world with endless companies pulling metal from the ground every single day. They imagine a large industry with unlimited supply, ready to meet any demand at any moment. But when someone starts looking deeper into how silver is actually produced, the picture becomes very different. In fact, it becomes surprising. Because most of the silver people buy, trade, or hold as protection against inflation does not actually come from mines built to produce silver. That sounds strange at first. Many people assume a silver mine exists only to mine silver, but reality works differently. Around the world, most silver is produced as a side effect of mining for completely different metals. When companies dig for copper, zinc, lead, or gold, silver often appears mixed inside the same rock. Instead of throwing it away, they extract it and sell it. This means silver becomes a byproduct, not the main goal. And this changes everything, because if silver prices suddenly rise tomorrow, many people expect supply to rise with it. They think mining companies will simply dig more silver and flood the market, but that is not how the system works. A copper company does not suddenly increase copper production just because silver becomes expensive. Their business depends on copper demand, copper profits, and copper economics. Silver simply comes along for the ride. This is where the real story begins. When experts study the numbers carefully, they discover something that surprises almost everyone. Only a very small number of mines in the world are considered true primary silver mines. These are operations where silver is the main product. These mines exist specifically to pull silver from the earth, and the list of major ones is far shorter than most people expect. That creates a question few are asking. If only a handful of operations truly control primary silver production, then who owns them? And what happens if global demand starts growing faster than supply can keep up? Because the answer to that question may explain far more about silver's future than most headlines ever will. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, turning on the news, and hearing that factories around the world are suddenly fighting for silver supply. Electric vehicle companies need it, solar manufacturers need it, military technology depends on it, medical industries cannot replace it easily, and investors, scared about inflation or economic uncertainty, begin rushing toward physical silver at the exact same moment. Now here is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because many people believe that when demand rises, supply naturally follows. More demand means more production. That sounds logical. It sounds normal. But silver does not behave like most people think. The reason is hidden inside one simple truth. Most silver miners are not actually silver miners. That sounds impossible at first, but the deeper someone looks, the more surprising it becomes. Across the world, nearly 70% of silver production comes from mines that were never designed to chase silver in the first place. Large companies searching for copper, zinc, lead, or gold simply happen to find silver buried alongside those metals. Silver enters the market almost by accident. And that creates a very dangerous weakness inside the system. Because imagine being the owner of a giant copper mine. If silver prices suddenly double overnight, does that company immediately change everything and rush to mine more silver? No. Their business still depends on copper. Their executives still watch copper demand. Their profits still rise and fall with copper markets. Silver, in many cases, stays secondary. This means one very important thing. Silver supply is far less flexible than people imagine. In many commodity markets, higher prices encourage higher production. Oil companies drill more. Farmers grow more crops. Manufacturers increase output. But silver often moves differently because so much of its supply is trapped inside industries focused on completely different priorities. And suddenly, a question begins to appear. What happens if the world enters a period where silver demand rises faster than byproduct supply can respond? Because signs of pressure are already visible. Technology is changing. Governments are pushing renewable energy faster than before. Factories building solar panels consume huge amounts of silver because of its unmatched electrical conductivity. Military electronics rely on it. Medical devices depend on it. Even advanced defense systems quietly require materials that cannot easily be replaced. But while demand stories grow louder, supply stories remain strangely quiet. Almost too quiet, because hidden beneath the surface is another reality that most people never hear discussed. A tiny number of true silver mines carry far more importance than the public realizes. And once someone understands who controls those operations, they begin to understand something far bigger. Why the future of silver may not be decided but by a very small circle of companies quietly holding some of the world's most important silver assets. Demand alone. And the first name on that list may surprise almost everyone. Why is it that something used in solar panels, military systems, medical technology, electric vehicles, and even advanced electronics still feels ignored by so much of the world? Because when people hear the word silver, many still picture jewelry, old coins, maybe a family treasure locked inside a drawer. Very few stop and ask a much bigger question. Who actually controls the metal that modern industry cannot easily live without? And when someone asks that question, the story suddenly becomes much more serious. Because in a world where most silver arrives as a byproduct of copper and zinc mining, the few companies operating true primary silver mines quietly become something very different. They become gatekeepers. Not because they planned it, not because headlines talk about them every day, but because simple math begins telling a story that is hard to ignore. Imagine a village with only 5 wells supplying clean water. At first, nobody worries. Everything feels normal. Water flows every day. People assume the system will always work, but suddenly demand doubles, while the number of wells stays exactly the same. Now imagine one well slows production, another faces political problems, a third struggles with rising costs or falling air quality. What happens next? That pressure starts spreading everywhere. Prices move, competition increases, and people begin realizing the system was never as strong as they believed. Silver works in a surprisingly similar way, because while headlines often focus on price swings, charts, or daily market drama, the deeper issue hides underground, inside the mines. Many of the world's richest silver deposits are aging themselves. Some regions face political uncertainty, others deal with rising operational costs, stricter regulations, or lower grade discoveries than decades before. Finding a giant new silver deposit today is not simple. In fact, it has become increasingly rare. And here is where the story quietly shifts from interesting to important. Because when supply becomes concentrated in only a few major operations, ownership suddenly matters more than most people understand. Who owns these mines? Who controls production decisions? Who decides expansion budgets? Who manages future output? Those questions begin shaping far more than investors realize. Because if silver demand keeps rising through industry, energy systems, defense manufacturing, and economic uncertainty, the companies sitting on the largest dedicated silver assets may suddenly find themselves holding something the market underestimated for years. But before looking at the first major silver mine, there is something almost nobody talks about. A hidden reason why the silver market behaves differently from nearly every other metal. And once people understand this, they may never look at silver shortages the same way again. And now, after understanding how fragile silver supply really is, the byproduct problem, the growing industrial demand, and the small number of primary operations that truly matter, the biggest question finally arrives: who actually owns the world's most important silver mines? Because once someone follows the ownership trail, the picture becomes far smaller than most people imagine. A handful of companies controlling a handful of critical assets in a market many still believe is unlimited, and that misunderstanding may be one of the biggest stories hiding in plain sight. Some of the world's largest primary silver mines are concentrated in countries like Mexico, Peru, China, and parts of Latin America, regions that have produced silver for generations. But ownership often sits inside publicly traded mining giants, companies quietly managing assets most people have never even heard of. And this matters for one simple reason. When supply becomes concentrated, power becomes concentrated too. Imagine if global demand suddenly jumps because of solar expansion, defense technology growth, rising inflation fears, or economic instability pushing investors toward hard assets. Could these companies instantly double production? Not likely. Mining is slow. Permits take years. Equipment costs rise. New discoveries are harder to find. And many of the best deposits have already been developed. That means the world cannot simply flip a switch and create more silver overnight. This is why some analysts believe silver behaves less like an ordinary commodity and more like a pressure system, quiet for long periods, then suddenly explosive when supply and demand stop moving together. History has shown something similar before. Markets often ignore structural problems until they become impossible to ignore. And by the time the public notices, the people paying attention early are usually already positioned. Now, does this mean silver suddenly explodes tomorrow? No one knows. Markets are unpredictable. But what becomes harder to ignore is this: a world increasingly dependent on technology, electrification, military systems, and industrial metals may be leaning more heavily on a resource whose supply is far more limited than most people realize. And perhaps the strangest part of all, many people still believe silver is everywhere, unlimited, easy to produce, simple, when reality may be telling a very different story. So now the question turns to them. Did they already know that most silver does not come from silver mines? And were they surprised to learn how few major primary silver operations actually exist in the world? Let them share their thoughts below. And if they found value in this breakdown, they should subscribe to Rules Changed, because sometimes the biggest economic warnings are the ones almost nobody sees coming.